My name is Ben Brode. I'm the game director on Hearthstone, and welcome to Hearthstone Support. Diedrich, does nobody at Blizzard have a better idea than the coin to balance going second in Hearthstone? The answer is no, nobody does. We did have a lot of ideas about how to balance going second. The first idea was just the player who goes second gets an extra card, right? That's it. And we noticed that with just that one change, the first turn advantage was 60% versus 40%. That's like a 20% difference. It's significant, right? And we wanted to get it to about 55%, 45%. That's about the first turn advantage in chess. And we tried a couple things. The first was, what if the player who goes second starts with more life, right? Because what often happens is first player has an advantage, they put the second player on the back foot, and they struggle back, but over time, that extra card makes a bigger difference, especially once you hit 10 mana, and it starts to even out, and they can come back. So let's give the second player a little bit more time, but it didn't make the gameplay feel good enough because they were always on the back foot. So we tried things like, what if player 2 starts with a 1/1 minion in the battlefield? What if player 2's first minion gets +1/+1. It's just got a free buff for their first minion. And these types of changes really started to make player 2 feel like they could overcome that advantage and get back into the game and start fighting it out. But the thing that made us feel the best was the coin. It does a couple things. One, it's a very active thing. You get to choose how you use the coin. It's pretty skill testing, figuring out if you want to use it early in the game or for a big swing turn later on. It creates a moment, right? When you play the coin, your opponent goes, uh-oh, it's the coin turn, what are they going to do? And that's cool too. And it does significantly affect the first turn advantage. We got it, I think the last time we looked at it, it was like 51 to 49%. It was very close. It's closer than a lot of other strategy games, and we think that's great. The coin's doing a great job for us. From Spivey of the Ebon Blade, what are the chances we see cards added to the classic set? I actually think this is very high. The classic set is meant to set the baseline fantasy of Warcraft in the Hearthstone universe. It's meant to provide players with a baseline of power so that they can build some satisfying decks. The classic set's one of the most powerful sets in the game right now. It's actually kind of a problem for us because it doesn't rotate like the other sets do. So if there's a really strong deck that uses almost entirely classic and basic cards, the standard environment just won't change. It'll be the same every year. And I think we need a format that does change every year. That's why we have the standard format. So we've been rotating some cards out of Classic, and that's been causing some disparities in the number of cards per class. Mage has less cards than any other class in Standard right now because of the Hall of Fame. So I think we have some opportunity to give Mage a couple more cards. We'd have to do it carefully because if we add too powerful cards to Mage, then we have the same problem we had before the Hall of Fame rotations, where the decks are the same every year and Mage is playing the same cards every year. So it's okay that they're playing some cards every year. I think there's a baseline of cards that's good to have. It's very powerful in those sets. We did rotate some into the Hall of Fame. I think we'll bring some back, maybe less powerful ones, maybe ones that set the class fantasy really strongly, and also give you an idea of what that class identity is. But I'm not sure what those would be just yet. From Sebastian Quiroga, what led to the decision to add hero characters like Lord Jaraxxus? It was a really creative mechanic at the time. Actually, this is a great story because we were doing a play test with one of the engineers from the World of Warcraft team, Pat Dawson. And this is way back in the early days of Hearthstone, and we were still experimenting with ways to represent the Alliance and the Horde as different factions, which we eventually scrapped. But every class had an Alliance hero and a Horde hero. And for us, the first Warlock Horde hero was Cho'Gall, and the Alliance, we had trouble coming up with a satisfying Alliance Warlock hero, so we went with the one that I could remember most, which was Wilfred Fizzlebang from the Grand Tournament. And Pat Dawson sits down for the playtest and chooses Wilfred Fizzlebang. And in World of Warcraft, Wilfred Fizzlebang tries to summon a fearsome Doomguard for the players to battle, but he accidentally summons Jaraxxus, Eridar Lord of the Burning Legion, who destroys Wilfred Fizzlebang and takes the place of the Doomguard as the new boss that the players have to battle. So Pat Dawson sits down and he selects Wilfred Fizzlebang and he says, Wilfred Fizzlebang, is there a Jaraxxus card in this deck? And there wasn't. And I was like, oh, well, that's a huge mistake. And so I immediately went back to my desk and I designed Lord Jaraxxus, who, when you summon him, he destroys you and takes your place as the new boss. And that's how we came up with that whole mechanic. All right, from Magician Moo. If we have nerfs in the game, how about buffs? I believe there are cards that would benefit from it. I agree with that. There's a lot of cards that would benefit from a buff, but generally, nerfs happen when something is way out of proportion with the rest of the cards, and we have to bring it in line. But buffs imply that like maybe we want to get everything into this thin, narrow band of power level, and that's actually just not the goal, right? We have cards that are intentionally bad, maybe because the play experience they create isn't as fun, or we want to create a challenge for players who really like to win with bad cards. There's a segment of our audience that prefers beating you with cards you think are bad. It makes their wins feel better. So we don't necessarily want every card to be in that thin range. And also we like printing cards that in the future will make other cards better, right? A lot of the Paladin secrets were pretty weak, but that meant that we could create cards like Mysterious Challenger that made Paladin secrets much better, and all of a sudden, with just a few cards, we could really change the meta. And maybe we did too good of a job with Mysterious Challenger, but it lets us use those cards in the future to have a big impact when new cards are released. From Green the Assassin, with 3 more sets becoming wild and possibly more wild players due to the current events and the rotation, are there plans to make wild sets purchasable with in-game gold? And actually, a lot of people don't know that you can actually buy wild sets and adventures on our websites through the Battle.net shop. You can also, if you ever bought like a piece of an old adventure while it was still in rotation, you can actually completely finish out the wings that you haven't bought yet with gold. But we are trying to keep the in-game shop very clean and very simple. We don't sell a lot of different products there, just the recent expansions. And so we've tried to keep that on the website and out of the game client where possible. That said, there's a lot of people asking for this, and it's something that we would consider going forward. This is from Joshua, the unpaid intern. You should fight for a higher wage, sir. Will Dungeon Run be updated to go with the new expansion? Well, we just announced the newest expansion of Hearthstone recently, and we have some exciting single-player content there. It does follow along with the theme of Dungeon Runs, the way that plays, but it's got a different take, right? We're exploring kind of a more monstrous side and doing some monster hunting. So it'll play a lot like Dungeon Runs, but it's got some fun twists I think players will enjoy. Here's a question from Andrew is taking Candle, which is shame on you, Andrew. Which college degree do you think would help most with becoming a Hearthstone world champion? And this is controversial, I don't know. I would just say, forget college, just play Hearthstone. There's no class on how to become a great Hearthstone player. Find other Hearthstone players that are quite good and ask them for advice. Put together a play group and play a bunch of Hearthstone. But don't let your parents see that answer. All right. Kristen, I haven't played Hearthstone in over a year. What? Oh, but I want to get back into it. Are there any resources that can help me? Yeah, certainly. I mean, there are lots of people online talking about Hearthstone on the Hearthstone subreddit or our forums. There are a lot of people streaming Hearthstone all the time. That's a great way to get back into Hearthstone. You'll see a lot of the popular decks or some of the new cards that have been released without having to go in and play on your own. But also, you can just come in and play Hearthstone. We won't bite. From Negative Rainbow. Is tournament mode going to have sideboard support? Sideboards in Hearthstone would be so nice. It's not, but I will say that tournament mode is kind of a misnomer with our in-game tournaments that we're working on right now. It's a specific implementation of competitive support for Hearthstone, specifically meant for you and your friends, or for small communities or fireside gatherings to get together and have a competitive experience together. And we're going to start out pretty simple. We're going to have things like Conquest and Last Hero Standing. You'll be able to choose a number of decks built into the tournament. But we want to really listen to players, figure out how we can make that better over time, and continue to add features and support it going forward. Often our tournaments only play with a single deck one time, right? If you win with this deck, you've won, or if you lose with the deck, it's out of the tournament in case of Last Hero Standing, and so you actually don't have a lot of opportunities to go in and out of a sideboard, which is essentially a separate group of cards that you can sub in and out of your deck. So the current formats we're using wouldn't make great use out of it, but we'll talk about those kinds of things going forward. I can't wait to get feedback from players about how we can make tournaments better. From FC Chan, why aren't there female kobolds? There are. Hard to tell, maybe. From Mike, where did the Inspire mechanic go? RIP. Well, you know, we could bring it back someday. We don't have any plans that we've announced, but I really like when we come up with new mechanics that really explore a new space, right? Inspire was a lot of fun for us to design around. We created a lot of cards in the Grand Tournament that really cared about interacting with your hero power in new ways. We explored a lot of the space that we were interested to explore. Obviously, there's more space there to explore. I I think we might go back there someday. But we have a lot of really fun ideas, and we do want new sets to be exciting and groundbreaking and inspiring. So we'll explore some new spaces for now, but who knows? We might go back and check out Inspire in the future. Austral, Ben, when are we going to see Pepe in Hearthstone? At least a card back. We love that little bird, less than 3. You know, we haven't talked about it. We had a Pepe meeting that we were going to try and figure out where to get him in, and it got canceled. Somebody had a conflict. So I'll get that back on the books, and we'll chat about it. From Cinderside, will there be ways to get old card backs? Yes, there will be ways to get old card backs. We've had actually a lot of conversations about what the best way to do this is. I think there's an interesting thing here, right? Because if you just give, let's say, hey, everyone, here's all the old card backs. I think a lot of people would be pretty upset, right? We worked pretty hard to get those card backs. It makes us feel special that we have card backs that other people don't have. So I think we have to make the friction to achieve an old card back pretty high. But that said, if we make the friction too high and make it feel kind of too expensive, I think that also could make people feel upset. So we have to figure out the right balance there and the right way to deliver those old card backs that feels like it has enough friction, but we're still working on that. From Sam Spires, is Q block a concern / on your radar? Yes, it is on our radar, and I think it could be a concern. It's kind of interesting. It's a very skill testing deck, which is generally very good for Hearthstone, right? To have these decks that are in the hands of a player who hasn't played 100 games of it, pretty low win rate. In the hands of a player who's played over 100 games, a very high win rate. That's good. That means there's a lot of interesting decisions to make, and you play it differently against different decks. So I like that. And overall, I have to figure out, is the power level too good? There are decks that are more powerful than it, so that's not the only metric, but it's something to think about. Is the next set going to have an impact on its performance? That's another thing that we have to figure out as well. And also, there's another component which is just harder to use data to get at, which is, how does this deck feel? How does it feel to play, which I think actually pretty good, and how does it feel to lose to, which I think we're still getting data on. Some people really don't like losing to it, and some people have found ways to interact with it in a more interesting way. But we are looking at it. I don't think that we're totally unconcerned with Q block or Warlock, but I don't think we also want to be too knee-jerky about how we respond to potential imbalances, especially with a new set on the horizon. From J Throw, hey BD Brode, what's your favorite golden card? I want to craft it in your honor. Please don't say Millhouse. I actually saw this tweet and already tweeted at him. I actually went through every card in the collection and looked for my favorite golden card, and I saw Crushing Walls, and I was like, wow, that's an incredible golden animation. The walls are literally crushing the people in the picture, and so I mentioned that, and he crafted it, so good on you. From Darling in the Franks, with so many expansions out now and more to come soon, have you ever given any more thought to increasing deck sizes, or perhaps making 60-card deck variant which uses its own separate game mode? Actually, we literally have tried this exact idea. Every game should feel different. It's fun when you're having a different experience each time. And that could be because players are coming at you with different decks, or because the way that your deck plays out is slightly differently each time. And the more cards you have in your deck, and the smaller the limit on the number of duplicates you can have in your deck, the more different each game will play out. So we actually tried a mode where you had to have 60 cards and they literally all had to be different. And that created this really interesting experience where the games were very different over time. It also has an effect that's harder to build a cohesive deck. So I think it's the kind of thing that might be fun for a tavern brawl or something to play with for a while, but maybe not a core mode for the game, at least right now. From Mark Fanta, when are you going to add a spectate random match button to the menu? I love watching people play, but don't have many friends. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. I think it's because I'm a Slytherin. Hashtag spectate, hashtag Hearthstone. Well, we don't have a plan for that right now, but you can go on Twitch and just select a random stream and just start watching somebody. It's a great way to both see the game that's playing and hear their thoughts, which I think is a really fun part of the spectating experience that's a lot harder to do through the in-game spectating. From Nick, period, question mark, exclamation point. Will you ever add an award for fully leveling up your hero? Well, right now we have golden cards that as you level up your hero, you get more and more golden cards. You earn your class cards first, and then the elusive basic neutral minions. And so you do get rewards all the way up to level 60. I think it's one of our more satisfying progression systems because you get experience points whether you win or lose, and it makes you feel better about losing if you get something like some XP. So I'd like to extend that system in the future. We don't have any specific plans about how to do that, but I think it'd be nice if that system lasted a little bit longer than it currently does. Thomas Zdanswicks. With the reverse nerf on Molten Giant, does that mean that Team 5 is looking at reverse other nerf cards in the future when they rotate to Wild, like Spirit Claws or the Caverns Below? Why reverse the Giant's nerf and not other cards? Molten Giant has a following, I would say. Really, when we nerfed a bunch of cards going into the standard rotation, one of the biggest reasons behind some of those nerfs was to make sure that the standard environment had the ability to change over time. Molten Giant was specifically nerfed for that reason because there was a bunch of archetypes of decks that were specifically enabled by Molten Giant. So once we came up with the idea of the Hall of Fame, we really came up with that idea because of the community response to the Molten Giant nerf. Then we can move cards out of the standard environment and into the Wild format, which is great for playing the cards that you love in that format. We felt like Molten Giant was the perfect card to move into that format. It's not too powerful there, hopefully, and you get to play those loved decks in that format. But there are other cards that maybe are just too powerful. They're not enabling certain deck archetypes that I don't think are as good of a candidate to move to Wild. But we're going to analyze those on a case-by-case basis going forward. Thanks for watching. I hope I answered your questions. This has been Hearthstone Support with Wired.